Ready for a deep dive today? We're really going to unpack Atomic Habits by James Clear. This book is it's full of strategies you can actually use. It goes way beyond just knowing about habits. It's really about building a system for making real changes that last it.
I think what really grabbed me was how much Clear emphasizes these small wins, these tiny gains. It's easy to get caught up thinking you need to completely change your life overnight, but he brings you back to reality, reminding you that it's really about consistency. It's those small steps forward, done consistently over time, that make a huge difference.
And he really lives by that philosophy, too. Clear starts the book with a story about a really intense experience he went through, a really bad baseball accident in high school. He had multiple facial fractures, a broken nose, even his eye detached. He was in a medically induced coma. It makes you wonder, how do you even begin to recover from something like that?
It's incredible, right? He was told you might not even walk the same way again. And through focusing on those small improvements every day, he became an academic All-American. That's the power of compounding right there in action.
So when we talk about compounding, it's not just like a money thing, right? This
Yeah.
applies to how we build habits, too.
Absolutely. Think about it, if you get 1% better at writing each day. By next year, you'll be writing at a totally different level.
That's a lot more motivating than just thinking about it as 1%. It's not some magical overnight transformation. It's about those small, consistent actions adding up.
And it works both ways, right? Those bad habits, even the ones that seem small, like hitting snooze or putting off a workout, they add up too, but in a bad way. That's why it's crucial to address those slip-ups, even if they seem minor, because they can snowball before you know it.
So how do we put this into practice? Clear lays out this really practical framework called the 4 laws of behavior change. What are your thoughts on that?
It's amazing how simple yet effective it is. He breaks down the entire habit loop into 4 parts: cue, craving, response, and reward. Take your morning routine, for example. Your alarm goes off. That's your cue.
You need that coffee.
Right. So you brew a cup. That's your response to the craving. And then you get to enjoy that first sip, the reward. When you understand these 4 stages, you can start to change them. You can use them to build good habits and break bad ones.
It makes it feel a lot less overwhelming than trying to change your whole life overnight.
Yeah.
So if we can figure out what those cues and rewards are for our current habits,
Yeah.
then we can start making changes, right?
Exactly. One exercise from the book that I found really valuable is the habit scorecard. Have you ever tried that?
I haven't actually tried that yet. It sounds like a good way to become aware of those habits we don't even realize we're doing.
Yeah, it can be a real eye-opener, you know. You might be surprised how many habits you've picked up over time, good and bad. But once you've got them listed out, then you can start playing around with different strategies, like habit stacking, for example.
Habit stacking. What's that?
So it's a really cool technique for building new habits. The idea is to link the new habit to one you already do. Let's say you want to start gratitude practice, but you can never find the time. You could stack it onto something you already do every day, like brushing your teeth. So every morning after you brush your teeth, you take 2 minutes and jot down a couple of things you're grateful for.
So you're using that existing routine as like a trigger for the new habit. It's like you're training your brain, okay, I do this, then I do that. That makes it seem much less daunting.
Exactly. It uses the power of association. And speaking of powerful, there's another aspect of habit formation that Clear talks about that's just fascinating: the environment. We tend to underestimate how much our surroundings actually influence our behavior.
He had that example in the book about the cafeteria at Massachusetts General Hospital. The results were unbelievable.
I know, right? They found that simply by just rearranging things in the cafeteria, like putting water bottles closer to the registers and having water pitchers on all the tables, they dramatically increased how much water people were drinking.
It just goes to show that we don't always make rational decisions. Our environment plays a huge role.
For sure. And it reminds us that we have the power to design our surroundings to help us build good habits and make it harder to fall back into bad ones. Think about it. Our world today is just flooded with distractions and temptations.
True, every app, every website, even the grocery store, it's all designed to grab your attention and keep you hooked.
Exactly. So instead of relying on willpower, which, let's face it, can be pretty weak sometimes, we can try to shape our environment in a way that supports our goals.
Okay, so how do we actually do that? What are some examples?
It can be small things, like if you're trying to read more, keep a book on your nightstand. Or if you're trying to cut back on junk food, don't even keep it in the house.
So it's about making the healthier choice the easiest choice.
Exactly. Get rid of the temptations, make it easier to do what you actually want to do. Now, even when you've got everything set up, you're still going to have times when you just don't feel motivated. And that's where Clear's Goldilocks rule comes in.
Oh, I love that concept. It basically says we're at our most motivated when we're working on tasks that are challenging but not too challenging.
Exactly. Not too easy, not too hard, just right. Think about a time when you were totally engrossed in something. Maybe you were playing a sport or learning something new or working on a creative project. What was it about that experience that made it so captivating?
It's that flow state, right? Where you're so absorbed you completely lose track of time.
Yeah, and that usually happens when we're pushing ourselves just a little outside our comfort zone. Not so far that we feel overwhelmed, but enough to keep things interesting.
Yeah, finding that sweet spot between boredom and anxiety.
Exactly, and that's what the Goldilocks rule is all about. It's about finding that perfect level of challenge that keeps you engaged and motivated.
But let's be real for a second. Even with the perfect challenge, there are going to be days when we just don't feel like doing anything.
Oh, for sure. That's where the difference between professionals and amateurs comes in.
Clear says that professionals show up even when they don't feel like it.
There's a great story in the book. An elite weightlifting coach said the secret to his athletes' success was their ability to handle the boredom of training every day. They didn't wait for inspiration to strike. They just showed up and put in the work no matter what.
So it's about building discipline and consistency, not relying on motivation, because sometimes it's just not there. And that's something I think a lot of us struggle with, myself included. We wait for that burst of motivation, and when it doesn't come, we give up.
It's so easy to fall into that trap. That's why it's so important to build what Clear calls an identity-based habit.
That's one of the most powerful ideas in the book, I think.
It's about shifting your perspective. It's not just, I want to write a book. It's, I am a writer. And that changes everything about how you see yourself and the choices you make.
So it's not about the goal itself. It's about becoming the kind of person who achieves that goal.
Exactly. You start making decisions that align with that identity, and over time, those decisions become habits.
It's like you're building your habits from the inside out. It's not about the external result. It's about who you're becoming in the process. It's like you're reverse engineering your goals. You're starting with the kind of person you want to be and working backward.
Exactly. And that leads us to one of the things I found most helpful in Atomic Habits, all the practical strategies for actually breaking bad habits and making good ones stick.
That's what it all comes down to, right? We can talk about this stuff all day, but if we can't actually apply it in our lives, it doesn't do us much good.
You got it. And one of the best techniques Clear talks about is making those bad habits harder to do. He tells this really interesting story about John Henry Patterson, the guy who started the National Cash Register Company.
Oh, yeah, that's the story with the saloon, right? Inventing the cash register basically stopped his employees from stealing.
That's the one. Before they had cash registers, it was easy for employees to pocket some cash. But once Patterson brought in those machines, stealing became a lot harder. The cash register itself made it more difficult to do the bad habit.
What a great example of using your environment to make bad behaviors less appealing.
It's like those little tricks people use, like putting the junk food out of sight. Or using those apps that block distracting websites. If you're serious about breaking a bad habit, make it inconvenient.
That makes sense. So what about the other side of the coin? How do we make those good habits more appealing? I know for me, if something feels like a chore, I'm much less likely to stick with it.
That's where Clear's focus on making good habits satisfying comes in. It sounds simple, but we forget how important pleasure and reward are when it comes to building habits.
We talked earlier about those 4 stages of the habit loop cue: craving, response, reward. If that reward isn't there or if it feels too far off, we're less likely to do it again.
Right. Think about it. We get that instant gratification from sugary snacks, right?
Mhm.
But eating a healthy meal, the reward's there, but it's not as immediate. Our brains are wired to go for pleasure and avoid pain, so we've got to find ways to make those good habits feel rewarding now, not later.
So instead of rewarding myself with a shopping spree after a long week, maybe I go for a hike in nature, something that's actually good for me and feels good right away.
Now you're thinking. It's all about finding rewards that match the person you want to be. And on the other hand, you can try making those bad habits a little more painful in the short term.
Well, that's interesting. I'm all ears. How can we make those bad habits less appealing?
It could be as simple as using a habit tracker. So you see that broken streak and it motivates you to not let it happen again. Or maybe you give a friend some money, and if you don't stick to your goal, they get to keep it.
Accountability partners, that's another strategy Clear talks about. It's amazing how much more likely we are to do something if we know someone else is watching and cheering us on.
Definitely. It's about using that social pressure in a positive way and making it more costly for you to slip up.
And lastly, Clear reminds us how important it is to actually track our habits. There's something really motivating about seeing your progress laid out visually.
For sure. It's like a visual reminder that you're committed to this. And as Clear says, that empty box on your habit tracker can be all the motivation you need to keep going.
It's all about those small wins adding up, just like that 1% improvement we were talking about.
Exactly. Atomic Habits really shows us that it's the small changes, done consistently, that lead to big results. It's not about some magic formula or a quick fix. It's about embracing that journey of always getting better.
I think that's a great takeaway for everyone listening today. Think about one small habit you want to change. It could be something like drinking more water, reading before bed, or taking a walk at lunch.
And remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about making progress. Like James Clear says, success is the product of daily habits, not once-in-a-lifetime transformations.
So what's your 1% going to be today? Until next time, happy habit hacking, everyone.